Hello, everyone. Welcome to our second segment of the Virtual Learning Labs with Vera Solutions. For people who are joining us for the first time, we are in conversation with Shama Sinha in a three-part series of our Virtual Learning Labs with Vera Solutions. Thank you so much for joining us today, Shama. In our last segment with Shama, we delved into the ways in which organizations can recognize the need to adopt tech solutions and the criteria they can use to evaluate the available options. Today, we will focus on ensuring organizational readiness while adopting tech solutions. So, Shama, we know that an organization's decision to invest in a new data management system comes after careful consideration. They set aside a budget, they choose and finalize the most suitable and appropriate solution, and they may also, determine the potential outcomes that they wish to see emerge from the use of the solution. And these efforts would be in vain if they're not able to seamlessly and wholly adopt the chosen tech solution. So, Sham, my first question is, if the whole point of organizations investing into a tech solution is that tech can make their lives easier, why do organizations need to prepare themselves before adopting a tech solution?
Yeah, great question. Thanks, Mamansa. I think probably the overarching answer to the why part is because of the times we are living in. You at this stage, you probably cannot do without a technology, and you already answered that at the end of the day, organizations do need to consider or start considering adoption of technology so that they become more efficient. And I think that probably is the first part of even why should they prepare for it. It's because they want to make their lives easier. It's because in today's age, there's just so much pressure to be effective, to report to your donors, to engage with your stakeholders, that to do all of that, technology has in many ways become indispensable. So I think the reason why they should prepare for it is because it's not a small task. It is an undertaking. It is a project in a way. So the way all of these organizations and nonprofits actually have missions that they are trying to accomplish, and they have like a proper strategy and plan to implement their programs or the interventions that they're working with. Similarly, adoption of technology is something similar. It is an undertaking, and you cannot just decide, oh, cool, I need to manage my data, I need a system to manage it, and you just have a system and you're easily managing it. That's not how easily it goes. You probably need to have a very defined way of going about it, starting at the leadership of thinking of what is going to happen, thinking of who is going to be involved, and thinking of what is the end goal that I'm trying to achieve. So all this to say, probably what organizations need to remember is, one, that you probably need to have some kind of technology adoption started, depending on where you're at, which stage you're at in your organization. And secondly, don't underestimate that undertaking and plan for it and prepare for it, because otherwise it will not be successful. And like all the different missions and programs that you have, you want this to also be treated as one of your programs, as one of your projects that you want to be successful. So maybe think about how you would go about with this adoption, if that makes sense.
That makes sense, Shama. And continuing from a point that you mentioned, this may vary for different organizations, right? So how would preparedness or the need to prepare be different for an organization who is very early in their tech adoption journey as compared to an organization who is a bit advanced in their tech adoption journey? And how can they build their readiness?
Yeah, I think probably, so whenever technology adoption is discussed or is probably being considered, there are a number of factors that usually contribute towards that. And one of those factors is really knowing your goal or really knowing what your objective is. So no matter what stage you're in, whether you're just getting started or whether you have maybe reached a point where you're using a ton of tools, you will have to make sure that that is one thing that is defined within your organization, or as an organization, you have already thought about what's the end goal that I'm trying to achieve. So that's agnostic of the stage of the organization. But besides that, once you have your objective defined, once you have your goal defined, surely how you go about it, how you prepare for it probably will vary. So if you are an organization who has, maybe you're a 2-member organization, maybe you have just started, and at most the technology that you use is probably a phone or maybe email. And maybe you have now reached a stage where there's a lot of information being captured. So it's about time that you move up to Excel sheets and start maybe tracking information in a more structured way in an Excel sheet. Or maybe you are an organization who already has been using Excel sheets, but you're scaling up and now you have a lot of data sets in place. And then maybe you need to start thinking of upgrading to a basic CRM system to manage your data. Or the other type is that you are an organization who already has adopted some technology tools. Maybe you're using a CRM system, maybe you're using a document storage system. And if you're continuing to scale up, which is always a good thing, and if you are having to manage more and more data with time, there are so many more things to consider as you prepare for further enhancements. Maybe you need a full-on IT team right now. Most nonprofits really don't have a dedicated IT team, which makes sense. Obviously, there are more important mission that you're trying to accomplish, and you probably don't have the capacity to employ dedicated IT, but that probably makes sense when you are at an initial stage. But if you've reached a stage where you have a lot of data to manage and a lot of systems to tackle, it's probably worth considering, worth investing in individuals who are dedicated to maintaining your technology or administering your data systems. So certainly it varies depending on which stage you're in, but there isn't one factor that they need to consider. You need to also consider, like I said, what is the capacity you have, which could translate into having a dedicated IT team, or maybe having one of your internal function program manager or someone working as a dedicated admin. It depends on your goal, which is a constant factor. And then it also depends on what funding you have.
That makes sense, Shama. Thank you for that. And I think to add to that, in our experience as well, many times organizations, spend a lot of time on designing and building a tech solution that's more suitable and relevant to their needs. But once it's ready to use, there are no resources that are dedicated or assigned to sort of updating and using the tool on a regular basis. And a few months later, we often find that the tech solution has, just bitten the dust. So I think it's important for organizations to realize that it's not just the systems and processes that undergo change in this tech adoption process. It is most importantly the people.
That is a very good point and super relevant point, and something that we also experienced recently. We have a lot of clients who come to us, we build a solid system for them, they really like it. And then in most instances, they are continuously working on it, they are evolving it. In a lot of instances, they are not upgrading it to align it with how they are upgrading their own functions. So you as an organization, you will always evolve. You will always reach a point where what you built 5 years back is probably obsolete or is probably not serving the purpose anymore. So as you make changes to your organization's programs, and as you start, as you start evolving, perhaps you need to, at the same time, be thinking, how does this impact the different tools and mechanisms that I have in place to support my program? And we have often seen organizations really not doing that. And if they do that, that's an excellent change management, I would say, where you are adding a new platform to your suite of offers that you have for the community. And every time you add a new platform, you're also very intentionally sitting down to think, what are the different types of reports that I want my system to pull to support this? And you start building and thinking and evolving your technology or the tools that you're using with that functional and programmatic decision as well. And that is very important. So absolutely right on what you just said.
Definitely. So, Sham, based on your experience at Vera, what are some of the other common gaps that organizations might fail to address, or the common mistakes that they might make in their, tech adoption process?
I would say one of the most common thing, and honestly, this is something I'm also still learning. I'm trying to understand what's the best way to think about this. But something very common that we have seen is the difference between could the technology address this requirement and should the technology address this requirement. Whenever we speak to organizations and whenever they are sharing what their needs are, what their requirements are, they usually have thought of these 10 different things, and their questions are around, can the system do this? Can the system do that? I mean, those are all great questions, yes, but if you're using a platform, a flexible platform, like we use Salesforce for our implementations, which is super flexible and with configuration or customization can probably address a lot of requirements. But if you're using a platform as flexible like that, the answer to can the system do this is usually going to be yes. But I think the main question that organizations are not asking is, should you be doing this in your system just because you are adopting a new system? Or is there a better way to answer that question? Or maybe you are unnecessarily adding a new step and adding complexity to your implementation without really thinking of why you would want to do that. So that could versus should is something that organizations don't often think. And probably something that consultants should support them with as they are talking about implementations, technology implementations. And then probably on similar note, another very common mistake is that organizations start completely relying on the technology to solve all problems. And I think it's important to remember that it's always a combination of manual intervention plus technology. Because once you have a system in place, let's say you have a database or a data management system in place, it's only as good as the data that you enter in, right? So if your staff is not following data integrity or maybe they are not following what have you set up as your format for entering the kind of specific data that you want to enter, your system will only follow what your staff enters basically. And sure, there's an argument that the system can have validations and checks, and all of that usually is possible and should be possible. But there's only so much that the technology can do for you at the end of the day. And the human element will always come in at some point, and that will determine, along with, of course, how you design your system, it will together determine whether the technology adoption was successful or not. So I would say these two are main things. Besides this, some other common things that we have seen is organizations often underestimate the importance of having a system champion. And this is similar to what I was talking about earlier as well. I think you need to have, if you are adopting technology, if you are bringing in digital tools, and you know that there's a whole bunch of staff members who you would want them to start using, you need to identify a couple of people who can be your champions, who can help you in this process, who can become the main point of contact for your staff members and support them. In some instances, like we were discussing earlier, depending on the size of the organization or the stage in which the organization is, these system champions could probably be internal staff members. So it could be maybe one of the grant managers or one of the program funders, or it could be a very dedicated IT team if you have a very big program or a big organization that's functioning. But the mistake that we want organizations to not make is to underestimate the importance of system champion, and also similarly underestimating the time needed from different types of stakeholders. So like you were saying, once the system is implemented or a new technology has been put in place, a lot of times organizations don't realize that even if the system is in place, there is some amount of effort, some amount of dedication and time that would be needed, a little bit less from the leadership team, a little bit more from system champions, but definitely needed from these different types of stakeholders. And then lastly, I would say not planning for change management, which definitely is the most important factor. And whenever there is any kind of change happening, any kind of new introductions happening in your organization, you always have to think about change management and not make user adoption an afterthought. Because at the end of the day, it's your employees, it's your staff that are all working together towards a specific mission, and you don't want to make work overwhelming for them by not pre-planning and not preparing and thinking of what my change management strategy would be.
Thank you, Shama. That makes so much sense. And I think in addition to that, building an organizational roadmap for adoption and implementation is so important during this process. Regular review and monitoring of the adoption process can help them in tracking the progress they've made, and also allow them in modifying their approach for successful tech adoption. As we know, like, even if an organization lays down an extremely detailed adoption plan, they still have to be open to the idea of rethinking some of their priorities based on new challenges that may emerge during the tech adoption process.
Yeah, exactly. I think very similar to what we were discussing last time as well, right? It needs to be in the organization's culture. It needs to be in the organization strategy. And again, maybe treat it as you would treat one of your field programs, right? You want to measure the success of field program. You want to evaluate the progress and the impact that it is making. You want to listen to the community members who you're serving through your programs. Similarly, why wouldn't you do the same if you are bringing in a new change within your organization? For example, if you're adopting a new technology, maybe have similar steps to measure the success of bringing in that technology, or listen to your key users and staff members and evaluate whether it's really a successful implementation or not. But bring it to culture, in short.
Definitely. So finally, Shama, could you also share some of the success stories of digital transformation that you've observed in your experience at Vera that have led to greater organizational efficiency amongst organizations over the years?
Yeah, for sure. I think over the last 10, 11 years, we have worked with more than 300 clients, and we have clients globally present. And probably I can take some specific examples. In short, what we have noticed through our surveys or through our conversations with these clients, some of the key things that we have noticed is organizations have been able to save time. They have been able to save money. They have been able to save headache. They have been able to strengthen their accountability, and they have been able to make better informed decisions. These are some of the common things that we have noticed from what we have heard from our organizations. And if I can take specific examples, we have worked with Aga Khan Foundation. We have been working with them since 2015 and 16 now. They are a great example of how they started. They started with the most critical function that they wanted to digitalize, and they started. We configured Salesforce system for them to help them manage their global reach system, which they are now using that system to manage the programs in more than 17 or I think 19 countries, and also measure the impact of those programs. And they are using AmpImpact for them. But eventually, with time, they also then upgraded that system to add in another functionality to manage their grants and awards. And then we are still in conversations with them, and we are still helping them make small changes or tweaks or support them as and when their functional processes are evolving. They are at the same time thinking, how should Salesforce, their internal Salesforce system, help the staff, the current staff, address the most important questions along with the change in functions. Similarly, EJAF, Elton John AIDS Foundation, they actually started working with us back in 2011, and they're still using the Salesforce system that they built. I think more recently, we are engaging with them again to sort of rebuild and redesign, which is a great news, because they have realized that as they have come so far as an organization, and as they have evolved, they have also thought about what they need to change in their current technology system so that everyone is keeping up with the times. So I think these organizations are examples of how they have saved effort and they saved time. We have also had organization save money by reducing license fees. And then, of course, because clients have easier way to work, that reduces a lot of problems. And I think one of the key things is, which is very common need across nonprofits, is the ability to be transparent and be able to report to your donors. And I think that kind of accountability and transparency that is brought about by the kind of systems that we build has been very visibly helpful to a lot of clients that we have spoken to.
Thank you so much for that, Shama. That was very helpful and encouraging as well. We all know that technology does have the potential to transform an organization, but organizations sometimes miss the step that comes between the decision to adopt technology and its implementation. And this conversation has placed importance on ensuring organizational preparedness for tech integration. And that's given us a lot to ponder upon. Thank you once again for joining us today, Shama. We look forward to our third and last session in this series with Vera Solutions, in which we will explore the risks and complexities that are associated with tech adoption and offer some insights on how to mitigate them. Thank you so much, everyone.
Great. Thanks a lot.